and welcome to the second video tutorial for Flashy Tools. Today we're going to be covering the different tools that are available to us in Flash and how we'll be using them. First of all, I would just like to cover why it's different designing and creating within Flash than it is to designing and creating within Photoshop. If we just go up to the image in Photoshop I have here. Now, it looks well and fine here. However, as you zoom in to the image, eventually you'll begin to see it, there we go, start to go jagged. And as you zoom in closer again, you'll see that it's actually broken up into lots of different squares. This is because images within Photoshop are created in the format of bitmap. Okay, now if we were just to zoom out here and go back into Flash, it won't matter how much we zoom in with Flash, the lines will always be perfect. So there's no distortion along that curve whatsoever. Now the reason for this is Flash operates on a different format. Flash operates through something called vector. Now basically what vector is a mathematical way of creating an image. What it does is it uses vector points, and then in between those different points it calculates what the rest of the image should actually look like. Why is this important, you're probably asking? Well, the reason is it doesn't matter how much you resize or distort an image in Flash, it will always remain pristine. It will never break up and start to look jagged like it would in Photoshop. And that is because of these vector points. Okay? But more so than that, it's also due to the fact that when you're modifying an image in Flash, you'll be doing it through these vector points. Now, it's also very important to know that in Flash, an object has two states that it will exist in, either as a stroke or a fill. Let's have a look at that, shall we? So, an example of a stroke would be this pencil. If we just come down here and draw a line, and then we come up to this sub-selection tool at the top and click on the line, you can see that we have these squares along the path, and these squares are connected by this green line. Now what these squares are is they will represent the vector points, and the line that goes in between is what's basically being mathematically calculated for us. Now we're able to alter this image by clicking on a vector point and moving them around. Probably a little bit easier if I zoom in a bit here. Go back up to that sub-selection tool. Okay, so you're able to click on these individual points and move them around, or move the entire thing. Or you can come to this selection tool here, and you're able to grab the points in between the vector points. So remember, there was a vector point here. We can see that if we go on the sub-selection tool. Vector point right there. If we go on the selection tool now, we can do the same thing. We can grab a vector point, and we can tell if we're going to grab a vector point because on the mouse you'll see that it's gone a little bit, basically half a square. Okay, you have a right angle appearing just underneath the mouse. But we can also affect the lines in between the vector points with the selection tool. So if we come down here, you'll notice that it's gone curvy. It might be easier to see here. See? Underneath the mouse it's gone a bit curvy, which means that we can actually grab the line and pull the line out and move the line around as well. So grab a vector point, and in between this vector point and that, we're able to grab the line and move the line around. So that is a stroke. If we get rid of this, now we'll use the brush tool. Now the brush tool will paint with fills. So if we just draw a line down like that, and then again if we go to our sub-selection tool and click on the paintbrush, you'll notice now that the vector points go all the way around, whereas before on the stroke, get the pencil out and do it one more time, you can see that the vector points exist on the actual line. Now it doesn't matter how thick that line is, because you are able to affect the stroke. Let's see here, if we affect the line thickness, so that now that stroke is thicker than the fill, those vector points still exist on that line. And that's the primary difference between strokes and fills. Okay, so we've seen two different tools used there, the pencil tool and the brush tool. Let me show you some other tools that we use to create. If we just go to the line tool here, I'm just going to very quickly make this a little bit thinner. But it does exactly as you'd expect. It draws straight lines. Now if we go next to it, we have the object tool. Now we're able to change the shape of the object by holding down the mouse button, and this window will pop up, and then just choosing whatever object you'd like to. Let's say we make a square, for example. We're able to make a square. We also have the text tool. We're able to create text in Flash also. Let's just zoom in there. Hello Internet. And then if we go back to the brush tool, click and hold down, we can also change to a spray can. And we can just draw some particles on the stage as well. Okay, now let's look at the tools that we'll be using to modify the objects we'll create with things such as the brush tool and the object tool. First of all, let's make a circle, plonk it down there, and also zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Now, I showed you the selection tool beforehand that we used to move the lines. Now that will affect objects as well, because as you can see here, we have a fill in the middle, and we have a stroke going around the outside. Okay, if we go over to the properties panel on the right hand side of the page here, you can see we can affect the color of the stroke. So we can make that, let's say, red. We can also affect the thickness of the stroke here. So we can turn that right the way up, or make it very, very difficult to spot it. Turn that a little bit. There we go. And we can also do the same with the fill. So we can come over here, we can select a different color. But of course, we can't affect the size. The size affects the stroke only because it's just a line, whereas the fill is calculated for us. And we're able to modify using this selection tool then, the exact same way as we was able to modify that line. So you'll see as the mouse moves closer, we'll get that curve that appears, which means we're then able to stretch out and fold in the object to make whatever custom shape we would like. And again, also sub-selection tool. We're able to click on the image and see exactly what vector points we're moving. It's just a little bit more precise. There we go. Okay. We also have the lasso tool over here. Those of you who have used Photoshop before will know what the lasso tool does. It's basically another selection tool. So we're able to grab chunks by pressing the backspace, deleting those chunks, grabbing whole sections, and getting rid of an image entirely. Or we're able to draw or erase parts of an object within itself. Now notice how, as I'm making the selection, I'm not closing the loop. I don't need to. It knows that that was the beginning around here, this is the end, so it draws a line there for me. And see, we're just able to make selections and delete things out like that. We also have the paint bucket tool, and that will operate as a fill. So you'll come down to the paint bucket, choose whatever color you would like, and you're able to change the color to a fill. And you're not able to do that with a stroke. Okay, very important to know that. The only way you can change the color of a stroke is by actually changing it in this properties panel or down in this color panel here. Now, as well as the lasso tool, selection tool, and subselection tool, we also have this free transform tool. Now what we're able to do is click and just let it be noted that as I've clicked once, I've only selected the fill. So if I were to move this out, it would leave the stroke behind. Let me try and place that back. Nope, that's not quite there. Just going to press Ctrl Z. Right, and put it back in spot. Now if I were to do a double click, it will select the stroke as well, so we can move the whole thing as a whole. We're able to resize and twist it around just the same as you can on Photoshop or other designing programs. Let's get rid of this. Just to make it noticeable, you don't need to drag over like I'm doing. You don't need to do that to make a selection. The exact same, you can click and delete, click and delete, or even double click and delete. It's just a force of habit when I drag. We also have the eraser tool. Every single individual will know what eraser tool does. There we go. We also have the magnify tool, which I showed you earlier, just to be able to zoom in on an object. It might be handy to know that if you hold down the Alt key and then click, it will reverse the function, so you won't zoom in, you'll zoom back out. Okay, so some tools I haven't quite covered yet. We have the eyedropper tool down here. Let's see here. Okay, if I were to make another object, there we go, and let me change its color to something like that strange purple. But I wanted to make this fill behind as well the same color. What I would do is I would select the fill, go to the eyedropper, then select that, and it would change that fill behind as the same color. Another tool I haven't covered is this 3D rotation tool, which I won't go into just yet, because that's to do with 3D objects, and this boning tool here, which I also won't go into just yet, because that goes into animation and structures for characters and all sorts of things like that. However, the two tools I haven't mentioned are this deco tool, which is something that was added in CS4. And basically, if you select it and you come on over to these properties, you can see we have lots of different options here. At the moment, we currently have the vine fill selected. So if I was to click on the background now, it would fill that background in with vines for me. But it has a lot more purpose than that. If you click on the drop down box, it has lots of different options. Let's say we go on the grid fill. We can click inside here. It'll drop us a little grid for us. Let's say we wanted to, I don't know, have some lightning. Okay, now it not being Photoshop and it not having as good an ability to do lots of finite editing, we have this lightning brush here, which will basically help us create lightning. You're not able to see that because the color is white. Let me change that to blue. You see now how it's drawing this lightning for me? Brilliant. Let me just zoom out, select everything and delete it. I'll zoom back in. The last tool I haven't covered is the hand tool down here. Now basically all you do with this hand tool is you move the stage around. So if you have things that are off the stage around here, you're going to select and then bring into the stage gradually, and you'd use the hand tool. But to be honest with you, you don't need to come over here and click on the hand. You can mess around, and then if you hold down the space bar, it turns into the hand for you. And then you're able to move around freely without coming off your previous tool. Okay. That is it for this video tutorial. In the next video tutorial, we'll open up with a small task, just so you're able to apply the things that you've learned from this video tutorial. And then we'll also go into the properties of these different tools. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.